Hi, I'm Zoe. I'm 22 years old, and I live here in Vermont. It's quiet, peaceful, the kind of place where you'd think things would be simple, grounded. Family means everything here, or at least, it's supposed to. You see the leaves changing outside my window? Beautiful, right? Everything looks calm on the surface. But sometimes, the most dramatic shifts, the biggest storms, happen right inside the places that look the most stable. Inside the family home. Inside your own heart. I'm sitting here today because I need to talk about something that happened. Something that felt like a small thing at the time, but it cracked my world wide open. It was about a year and a half ago, almost 2 years now. My grandmother passed away. She wasn't just any grandmother, she was the grandmother in our family. The matriarch, the keeper of stories, and, honestly, the one who held a lot of things together, even if I didn't fully see how precarious it all was until she was gone. When she passed, there was the expected grief, of course. The sadness of losing someone who was a constant presence. But beneath that, for me, there was also a strange mix of anticipation and, well, hope, I guess. Because there was something, an heirloom, that I had always felt a connection to. Something I thought, just maybe, would finally be mine. It was a necklace. A simple silver locket, intricately carved, passed down through the women in our family. My grandmother wore it nearly every day. As a little girl, I remember tracing the patterns on it while sitting on her lap. She told me stories about who had worn it before her, her mother, her grandmother. It felt like a tangible piece of our history, a thread connecting generations. And more than that, it felt like a quiet promise. My grandmother and I had a special bond. We were both the quiet ones, the observers. She saw me, I think, in a way others didn't. So, when the will was being read, surrounded by my family, my parents, my older sister, aunts, uncles, I wasn't expecting much in terms of money or big assets. That wasn't our family's way, or at least, it wasn't my expectation. But the locket? That felt personal. It felt like something that was meant for me. A symbol of that quiet connection, that shared history. You know how you can just feel something in your gut? A certainty that's almost physical? I had that feeling about the locket. I could picture holding it, feeling the cool metal, continuing the tradition. It wasn't about the value. It was about the legacy, the sentiment, the silent acknowledgement of a bond I cherished. But things don't always work out the way you expect, do they? Especially not when appearances, as I later understood, seemed to matter more than genuine connection or quiet understanding. The locket skipped a generation, in a way. It didn't come to me. And the reason? The way it was explained, or rather justified, was a punch to the gut. It went to my sister. My older, always, more favored, sister. Let me tell you, that moment in the lawyer's office wasn't just about a necklace. It was about every time I'd felt overlooked. Every time my sister's achievements, no matter how small, were celebrated while mine, no matter how significant to me, were barely acknowledged. It was about the constant comparison, the subtle and not so subtle messages that I was less, less important, less visible, less worthy of recognition. This story isn't just about a piece of jewelry or a will. It's about what happens when the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally, the people who are supposed to be your safe harbor, are the ones who hurt you the most. It's about learning that appearances can be deceiving, and that sometimes the quiet ones have to find their voice, even if it shakes the foundations of everything they've ever known. Have you ever felt like that? Like you were standing right there, giving everything you had, and still felt invisible? Like your worth was constantly being measured against someone else's, and you always came up short? Let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and if any of this resonates with you. Because maybe, just maybe, we're not as alone in this as we feel. Now, let me take you back to that day. The day the will was read. The day the locket didn't come to me. The day everything started to change, even though I didn't know it then. The air in the lawyer's office was thick with that uncomfortable silence that follows grief, mingled with the awkward anticipation of inheritance. We sat on stiff, uncomfortable chairs, a circle of solemn faces. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, a performance I had seen many times before, usually when she wanted something. My father sat beside her, a silent, stoic presence, his gaze fixed somewhere above the lawyer's head. My older sister, Clara, sat opposite me, her expression a carefully composed mask of sorrow, though her eyes darted occasionally towards the briefcase on the desk. She was 25, poised, always impeccably dressed, the one who effortlessly commanded attention in any room, the one my parents had always held up as the example. I sat quietly, as was my habit. I was the younger sister, the quieter one, the one who didn't demand attention, who tried to be helpful, easy, accommodating. My heart pounded a little, but not just with grief. There was that thread of hope, thin but persistent, about the locket. The lawyer, a man named Mr. Henderson with kind eyes and a gentle voice, cleared his throat and began to read. He went through the formalities, the distribution of assets, the house, the car, the bank accounts. Nothing surprising there. It was divided between my parents, who would manage it for themselves, and eventually, I assumed, for us. Then he came to the personal effects. A painting went to an aunt, a collection of porcelain figures to another, and then he mentioned the jewelry. To my beloved granddaughter Clara, Mr. Henderson read, his voice steady, I leave my silver locket. May it bring her strength and remind her of the women who wore it before her. My breath hitched. I felt a physical jolt, like a sudden drop. Not to me, it went to Clara. I stared at the lawyer, then at Clara. Her mask of sorrow didn't slip. She simply nodded, a small, graceful inclination of her head, and murmured, Thank you. It's beautiful. It was the way she said it. So calm, so expected, as if there had never been any question. My mother reached over and squeezed Clara's hand, giving her a small, approving smile. My father offered a brief, almost imperceptible nod in Clara's direction. No one looked at me. Not my mother, not my father, not Clara. It was as if I wasn't even in the room. The rest of the reading blurred. I heard other things mentioned, small items, none of them for me. I wasn't expecting anything else substantial, but the locket, that was the one thing that felt rightfully, emotionally, mine, and it wasn't. I felt a heat rising in my chest, a prickling behind my eyes. I swallowed hard, trying to push down the sudden surge of pain and humiliation. It wasn't just about the locket. It was what the locket represented. It was the symbol of every time Clara had been chosen over me. Every time her accomplishments were amplified and mine minimized. Every time I was expected to understand, to be the flexible one, the easy one, while she was catered to. That Christmas, when I'd gotten a scholarship to an out-of-state university, my parents had nodded, said, That's nice, Zoe, and then spent the rest of the evening talking about Clara's acceptance into a local college, closer to home, where she could still live with them. That time, I worked all summer to save up for a used car, meticulously researching and finally buying one. My father had barely glanced at it. The next month, Clara crashed her perfectly good car, and within a week, they'd bought her a brand new one. For safety, my mother had explained, looking pointedly at my older, dented vehicle. That time I took 3 months to knit my mother a complex Aran sweater for her birthday, staying up late, pouring hours of careful work into it. She'd smiled politely and set it aside. The next day, Clara arrived with a hastily bought scarf from a department store, and my mother had exclaimed over its color and softness, wrapping it around her neck immediately. It was always like this. Small moments, adding up, building a quiet, heavy weight in my chest. The locket felt like the final, crushing stone. It wasn't just an object. It was the physical manifestation of my grandmother's perceived preference, a preference that mirrored my parents' own. Except, I had always felt that my grandmother did prefer me, in her own quiet way. She was the one who listened patiently when I talked about my worries or my dreams, the ones my parents often dismissed as silly or impractical. She was the one who taught me to knit, who shared her recipes, who simply sat with me in comfortable silence. The locket felt like our thing. How could she have left it to Clara? After the will reading, we went back to my parents' house for a subdued lunch. The atmosphere was strained. Grief was present, but underneath it, there was an unspoken tension. Clara was showing the locket to my mother, who was cooing over it, admiring the intricate carving. Grandma always said this was the most special piece, my mother said, her voice thick with emotion, though I suspected some of it was performative. She always intended for it to go to the one who would appreciate its history the most. Appreciate its history the most? I bit back a bitter laugh. I was the one who knew the history. I was the one she had shared the stories with. Clara had barely paid attention when Grandma talked about the past. Clara was always more interested in the future, in what she could acquire, not what she could inherit emotionally. I found myself standing alone by the window, looking out at the familiar Vermont landscape, green and rolling, but feeling utterly disconnected from the scene inside. My father came up beside me, placing a hand awkwardly on my shoulder. "You okay, Zoe?" he asked, his voice low. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. He cleared his throat. "About the locket, you know how your grandmother was. She wanted things done, properly. Clara is the older sister. It makes sense, in a way." It makes sense? The sheer, casual dismissal of my feelings, of my connection to the locket, of my bond with my grandmother, felt like another blow. It wasn't about age, it was about perceived status, about appearances, about maintaining the established family hierarchy where Clara was the golden child and I was the other one. The sensible one, the independent one, the one who didn't need anything because she could manage on her own, the one who was easy to overlook. But she told me stories about it, I managed to say, my voice shaky. She knew how much I loved it. My father patted my shoulder again. "Yes, well, she loved you both, of course. But traditions, they are important. And Clara, she has a way of looking after things. You're a bit more adventurous, likely to misplace things, maybe?" He attempted a weak smile. Adventurous? Misplace things? This was his explanation for why a deeply sentimental heirloom, one I had cherished and connected with for years, went to my sister? Because I might misplace it? The absurdity of it was staggering. It wasn't about misplacing it, it was about him and my mother believing I was less responsible, less worthy of trust, less everything. I couldn't stand there anymore. I mumbled something about needing some air and slipped outside, leaving the strained gathering behind. The cool Vermont air did little to clear the suffocating feeling. I walked aimlessly through the yard, past the garden my grandmother had tended with such care. Every flower, every bush, seemed to mock me with its quiet beauty, a beauty I suddenly felt no part of. The locket incident wasn't the beginning of my pain. It was the culmination of years of feeling like an afterthought. It was the moment the quiet, underlying current of favoritism and neglect became a roaring, undeniable wave. It forced me to look back, to connect the dots of a lifetime spent trying to earn love and recognition that seemed to flow effortlessly to my sister, simply because she was her. I remembered countless instances, birthday parties where my theme or guest list was secondary to Clara's demands, school events where my parents only showed up for Clara's performances or awards, family vacations centered around Clara's interests, with me expected to just tag along and be agreeable. Financial support that was readily available for Clara's whims, new clothes, spontaneous trips, but met with hesitation or conditions for my genuine needs, textbooks, essential car repairs. And the emotional labor. Oh, the unseen emotional labor. I was the one they came to with their problems, the one expected to be the family peacemaker, the listener, the shoulder to cry on. My mother would call, tearfully describing a minor disagreement with a friend, and I would spend an hour on the phone offering comfort and advice. Meanwhile, my own stresses, my own heartbreaks, were brushed aside with a quick, "Oh, you'll be fine, Zoe, you're strong." I was strong because I had to be, because no one else was going to tend to my emotional needs. I was the one who quietly managed my own life, who worked part-time through college to cover expenses my parents deemed non-essential, who never asked for help because I knew it would either be given begrudgingly or not at all. Clara, on the other hand, seemed to float through life, buoyed by an invisible cushion of parental support. She never had to worry about money. Her bills were paid, her apartment rent subsidized, her career path smoothed by connections my father conveniently provided. And she never seemed to feel the need to give back, not in effort, not in emotional support. She took, and they gave, happily. The will reading wasn't just about a locket, it was about the narrative of my life within that family being reinforced. You are less valued, less seen, less deserving of even sentimental recognition. My grandmother, the one person I thought understood me, seemed to have validated that narrative in her final act. The grief for my grandmother was now inextricably tangled with a searing pain of personal betrayal. It felt like she had chosen to endorse the family's perception of me, rather than acknowledging the actual, quiet connection we shared. Days turned into weeks. I went through the motions of life, but a heavy, suffocating blanket of sadness and anger settled over me. I felt isolated. How could I explain this to anyone? To friends who had seemingly normal family dynamics? To articulate that the pain wasn't just about a material object, but about a lifetime of feeling fundamentally unseen and unloved by the very people who were supposed to cherish you. I tried talking to a friend, vaguely mentioning feeling hurt about something related to my grandmother's will. She listened kindly, but seemed to focus on the financial aspect, suggesting maybe the money was more important anyway. I quickly shut down, realizing the nuances of emotional neglect and favoritism were too complex, too embarrassing, too easily explain. It sounded petty when you just said, "My sister got a necklace." It wasn't petty, it was soul crushing. I withdrew further into myself. I spent hours replaying conversations, analyzing past events, searching for a reason why I was treated this way. Was I inherently less likable, less capable? Was there something fundamentally wrong with me that made me less worthy of their unqualified love and support? The internal spiral was dizzying and dangerous. My self-esteem plummeted. I started doubting my own memories, my own feelings. Maybe my father was right. Maybe I was just forgetful. Maybe I didn't appreciate things properly. Maybe I was too adventurous, too independent, too something. The pain manifested physically. I had trouble sleeping. My appetite disappeared. A constant knot tightened in my stomach. I felt perpetually exhausted, not from physical exertion, but from the sheer weight of emotional distress. One evening, several weeks after the will reading, I was at my parents' house for a strained family dinner. Clara was there, talking animatedly about a new job opportunity she was pursuing. My mother was beaming, asking endless questions, offering unsolicited advice, her attention solely fixed on Clara. My father occasionally chimed in with a proud comment. I sat there, eating silently, feeling the familiar ache of invisibility. I had recently received a promotion at my own job, a significant step up that I had worked incredibly hard for. I had mentioned it to my parents on the phone a few days earlier, and the reaction had been lukewarm at best. "Oh, that's nice, dear," my mother had said distractedly before launching into a story about something Clara had done. Tonight, listening to them fawning over Clara's potential new job, a job she hadn't even gotten yet, while my actual, achieved promotion was ignored, something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap, but a quiet internal breaking. A piece of my capacity for silent endurance just fractured. I looked at the three of them, my mother with her performative concern, my father with his passive approval, Clara basking in the spotlight, completely oblivious to the fact that she was getting all the air in the room. And I saw them, not as the perfect family unit they presented to the world, but as people caught in a destructive pattern, a pattern I was trapped in too. I saw my own reflection in the dining room window, pale and drawn, the picture of someone slowly shrinking, disappearing, and I suddenly, fiercely, didn't want to disappear anymore. It wasn't a dramatic epiphany, not a bolt of lightning. It was a slow, painful dawning, like watching a sunrise that hurts your eyes. I realized I couldn't change them. I couldn't force them to see me, to value me, to love me in the way I craved. Their behavior wasn't a reflection of my worth. It was a reflection of their issues, their biases, their limitations. The locket, in a twisted way, had been a gift. It had ripped the Band-Aid off a wound that had been festering for years. It had shown me, in stark, undeniable terms, where I stood in their eyes. And that clarity, however painful, was necessary. Over the next few weeks, I started making small changes. I stopped automatically answering my mother's calls. I started saying no when asked to do inconvenient favors for the family that were clearly for Clara's benefit or to ease my parents' burdens in ways Clara wasn't expected to. It was terrifying. Every no felt like a rebellion, a seismic shift in the established order. The reactions were immediate and predictably negative. My mother would sigh dramatically on the phone, asking if I was angry with her, implying I was being selfish. My father became even more withdrawn, disapproving. Clara seemed genuinely bewildered by my lack of immediate compliance. She had always counted on my quiet reliability. "What's wrong with you, Zoe?" my mother asked one day, her voice tight with irritation. "You used to be so helpful, so easygoing." Easygoing. That was the word. Code for compliant, quiet, not rocking the boat. "I'm just busy, Mom," I would say, a simple, true statement that felt like a monumental lie because it hid the real reason. I was busy reclaiming my own life, my own energy, my own peace. The emotional weight of this pushback was immense. I felt waves of guilt, of doubt. Was I being unfair? Was I overreacting? Was the locket really that big of a deal? The voices of my past, the internalized messages of being difficult or dramatic, whispered in my ear. But beneath the doubt, a new feeling was stirring: resilience. Every time they reacted negatively to a boundary, it wasn't a sign I was wrong, it was a sign the boundary was necessary. Their discomfort was a measure of how much they had relied on my compliance, on my willingness to prioritize their needs over my own. I started actively seeking out things that nourished me. I spent more time with friends who saw and appreciated me for who I was. I focused on my job, channeling my energy into building my own success, independent of my family's validation. I took long walks in the Vermont woods, finding solace in the quiet strength of nature. I started reading books about family dynamics, about boundaries, about emotional intelligence. The knowledge I gained was empowering. It gave a name to what I had experienced, validating my feelings and showing me I wasn't alone. The transformation wasn't linear. There were days I wanted to cave, to go back to being the easygoing Zoe just to stop the tension, the coldness from my family. But then I would remember the locket, the feeling in that lawyer's office, the lifetime of quiet hurt, and the resolve would return. The pain of staying the same was finally greater than the pain of changing. The confrontation, when it came, wasn't a single, explosive argument, but a series of smaller, increasingly direct conversations. The most significant one happened during a visit home, about 6 months after the will reading. Clara was there, showing off the locket, wearing it around her neck. My mother was admiring it, touching it reverently. I saw it, and the familiar pang hit, but this time, it was less about the object itself and more about the blatant display, the continued lack of acknowledgement of my feelings. "It really is lovely," I said, my voice calm, though my hands were trembling slightly in my lap. Clara glanced at me, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. "Thanks, Grandma had such good taste." "She did," I agreed. "She told me stories about it, you know. About great. Grandma Rose wearing it, and her mother before her." My mother interjected quickly. Yes, it has a wonderful history, and Clara will make sure that history is preserved. She's so good at keeping things safe. There it was again. The subtle jab, the implication that I wasn't trustworthy or responsible. This time, I didn't let it slide. I looked directly at my mother. That hurt, when the locket went to Clara. Not because I wanted the object itself so much, but because it felt like everything else. Like I didn't matter enough to inherit something so meaningful, something I had a real connection to. Silence. Heavy, awkward silence. Clara stopped fiddling with the locket. My father looked away. My mother's smile tightened. "Zoe, don't be ridiculous," my mother said, her voice hardening. "It's just a necklace. And Clara is the elder sister. It's traditional." "It's not just a necklace, Mom. And it's not just about tradition. It's about feeling consistently overlooked, like my feelings and my connection to Grandma weren't as important as Clara being the proper heir." I took a deep breath. This was the hardest part, articulating the deeper pain. It's like everything else. Clara gets the focus, the support, the belief. I get whatever's left over. The expectation that I'll just handle it, that I don't need anything. My mother's face flushed. "That is completely unfair. We love you just as much. We've always provided for you." "Provided?" "Yes, you provided the basics," I said, my voice gaining strength, the years of suppressed feelings finally finding a pathway out. "But you didn't provide the same emotional support, the same belief, the same celebration of my achievements. You expected me to be independent and self-sufficient while you coddled Clara. And that's not equal, Mom, that's favoritism." Clara finally spoke, her voice laced with indignation. "Favoritism? Are you serious? I worked hard for everything I have. You just expected things to be handed to you." My jaw dropped. Expected things to be handed to me? Clara, you've never had to worry about rent. Dad set you up with that first job. Your car was replaced for you the week you crashed it. I've worked since I was 16, to pay for my own things, save for college, buy my own car. That's because you make poor choices. My mother cut in, her voice sharp. If you were more sensible like Clara, maybe you wouldn't have struggled so much. Sensible like Clara? Clara, who lived beyond her means and always needed bailing out. Clara, who had never had to manage her own finances. The gaslighting was breathtaking in its audacity. "My choices allowed me to become independent," I retorted, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and hurt. "They allowed me to build something for myself, without relying on anyone else, and that, apparently, made me less worthy of your attention or your heirlooms." My father finally spoke, his voice weary. "Zoe, that's enough. You're being dramatic. Your grandmother made her wishes clear. Let it go." Let it go. The constant refrain. Let go of the hurt, the unfairness, the feeling of being fundamentally misunderstood and undervalued. "I can't let it go," I said, standing up. My legs felt shaky, but my resolve was firm. "Not anymore. This isn't just about a locket. It's about realizing that no matter what I do, I will never be enough for you to see me fully, to value me equally. And I can't keep living like this, constantly seeking validation that will never come." I looked at each of them. My mother, her face a mask of wounded indignation. My father, avoiding my gaze. Clara, defensive and dismissive. The family unit I had always tried to fit into suddenly felt foreign, toxic. "I love you," I said, and the words felt heavy, weighted with sadness for the family I wished I had. "But I can't keep hurting myself by trying to make you see me. I need to step back. I need some space." I didn't wait for a response. I turned and walked out of the dining room, out of the house. I remember the crisp Vermont air on my face as I got into my car, the same used car my father had dismissed years ago, the car I had bought with my own hard-earned money, and I drove away. Driving felt like flying. There was pain, yes, a deep ache in my chest, but there was also an incredible sense of lightness. The weight of years of trying to be someone I wasn't, of trying to earn love that should have been freely given had been lifted, or at least loosened its grip. The period that followed was difficult. My family didn't understand. They interpreted my need for space as rejection, as punishment. My mother sent passive-aggressive texts. Clara made veiled comments on social media. My father remained mostly silent, a disapproving presence in the background. But I held firm. I limited contact, keeping conversations brief and superficial when they happened. I prioritized my own well-being. I continued therapy, processing the years of emotional baggage. I learned about setting and maintaining boundaries, realizing they weren't about punishing others, but about protecting myself. It was lonely sometimes. There were moments I missed the idea of the family I thought I had, the closeness I craved. Holidays were particularly hard, navigating the strained interactions or choosing to spend them alone or with friends. The narrative my family perpetuated was that I was the difficult one, the one who had pulled away, and that narrative was painful. But gradually, the pain began to subside, replaced by a quiet strength. I started to see myself through my own eyes, not through the distorted lens of my family's expectations and biases. I saw a capable, resilient, empathetic woman. I saw someone who had navigated difficult circumstances and emerged stronger. My career flourished. I built deeper, more meaningful friendships. I discovered hobbies and interests that brought me joy, independent of external validation. I learned to trust my own judgment, my own feelings. The locket became a symbol, not of betrayal, but of my turning point. It was the catalyst that forced me to confront the reality of my family dynamics and to choose my own well-being over their approval. I no longer envied Clara having it. I had something far more valuable: my freedom, my self-respect, my sense of self. I realized that my grandmother's decision, while initially devastating, might have had layers I couldn't see. Perhaps she, too, was caught in the family pattern, pressured to conform to expectations. Or perhaps, in her own quiet way, she knew the locket was the one thing that would force me to see the truth, to finally break free. It's a kinder thought, one I sometimes allow myself. But ultimately, her intention doesn't matter as much as the impact it had, and the catalyst it became for my own liberation. My relationship with my family is still complex. There are still moments of tension, of misunderstanding. But I no longer seek their approval or hinge my self-worth on their perception of me. I engage on my terms, maintaining the boundaries I have set. Some family members have slowly started to adapt, others haven't. That's okay. My peace is no longer dependent on their change. I learned that easygoing wasn't a compliment, it was a term of convenience for them. I learned that being strong didn't mean enduring endless hurt, it meant having the courage to protect yourself. I learned that the quietest moments, like sitting alone after walking out of a tense family dinner, can be the start of your loudest, most authentic chapter. The girl who sat in that lawyer's office, quietly hoping for a sentimental keepsake and feeling crushed when it went to someone else, is not the woman I am today. That girl was still living in the shadow of others, defined by their expectations and limitations. The woman I am now stands in her own light, defined by her own values and strengths. I still live in Vermont. The leaves still change color every year, beautiful and dramatic. But now, when I look at them, I see not just the quiet surface, but the powerful, life-giving transformation happening within. And I know that kind of change is possible for anyone, if they are brave enough to face the truth, even when it comes from the people they love the most. It started with a locket, a seemingly small thing, but it ended with me finding myself. And that, I've realized, is an inheritance beyond measure. It is the most valuable heirloom of all. So, I'm Zoe, and that's my story. It started with a feeling of being overlooked, of quiet pain that exploded into a breaking point over something as simple as a family heirloom. I felt betrayed by the people I loved most, the ones who were supposed to be my anchors. I spiraled, I questioned myself, I felt isolated. But finding the courage to set boundaries, to confront the pattern, and ultimately, to choose myself changed everything. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, like your efforts and feelings are always secondary, or like you're constantly being compared and found wanting, I see you, your feelings are valid. Your worth is not determined by how others treat you, especially if those others are caught in their own cycle of bias or favoritism. Learning to prioritize yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary for survival, for growth, for finding true peace. It's hard, sometimes heartbreakingly hard, to create distance or set boundaries with family. There's guilt, there's pushback, there's mourning for the relationship you wished you had. But on the other side of that difficulty is freedom. It's clarity. It's the space to finally build a life that is truly, authentically yours. My journey isn't unique. So many of us carry these quiet wounds from childhood, from family dynamics that teach us our value is conditional. But the good news is, you don't have to stay stuck there. You have the power to change the narrative, to reclaim your worth, and to build the connections that nourish you. If this story resonated with you, please give this video a like. It helps me know that sharing my experience is helpful to others. And if you want to hear more about setting boundaries, healing from family trauma, or finding your voice, hit that subscribe button. I'll be sharing more of my journey and the lessons I've learned. Leaving a comment below, even just to say hello or share a tiny piece of your own experience if you feel comfortable, can also help build this community of people who understand what it's like to navigate complex family relationships. Knowing you're not alone makes all the difference. Remember, your worth is inherent. It's not given to you by others, and it cannot be taken away. You are enough, exactly as you are. Thank you for being here and for listening. Until next time, take care of yourself. You are worth protecting.